Young Josh had been sick for most of his life, and no doctor or specialist had ever been able to find out the real cause of it. And as Josh got weaker and weaker, his parents Peter and Najee were ready to give up their battle and have their son spend his final moments with his beloved dog Snickers. But when the pair were forced to say goodbye one last time, something miraculously happened. What the hell was going on? But during this endless hug, something seemed to happen. Something seemed to change in the very sick Josh. Something that his parents could not explain but was noticeable enough to inform the doctor about. He listened to their find in complete disbelief. By some miracle, the hug between Josh and Snickers had finally given the doctor the answers he had been looking for so long. But what had the parents noticed about Josh during the hug? What was actually wrong with him, and would he now be able to get better? Poor little Josh had been in and out of hospitals for the majority of his young life. He could go from perfectly healthy to really sick in no time, and no doctor had yet been able to determine what was actually wrong with him. This made the situation even harder for the family, as there was seemingly no end in sight. Josh's condition had been the focus of the family for years now, and dealing with it consumed most of their lives. They did not have time for friends and barely for family. The only company they really kept was those of hospital staff and their loyal dog Snickers. Josh's parents, Peter and Najee, had adopted Snickers way before Josh was even born, and they loved the animal with all their hearts. And that love was very much returned to them, although it did seem like Snickers loved Josh even more than them. Every time Josh had to go to the hospital again for days or even weeks on end, Snickers would just sulk in his bed and have very little energy to play. You could see in these moments that he was in fact already an old dog, one whose life might be just as at risk as that of Josh. It was Peter and Najee's worst nightmare to lose their son, but if they were to lose their loyal pet as well at this time, that might just be the nail in the coffin for the couple. But they knew that there was still a lot of life in the old dog, as that was always on display when Josh came home again. Snickers would completely flare up, wagging his tail and jumping around for joy. The dog could simply not contain his excitement when his best friend in the whole wide world came home. They would spend as much time as possible together, cause they knew it would probably not be long before Josh was in the hospital again. And sadly, the time that Josh consecutively had to spend in the hospital only got longer as he got older. His young body had grown tired throughout all the years of fighting this mysterious illness. Every time he got sick, it would be long before he was strong enough to go back home. And besides that, the family also tried their luck with numerous so-called specialists all over the country. This always included some travel and an observation period, which meant that Josh could again be away from home for weeks on end. Sometimes they were able to take Snickers with them, but most of the time the old dog stayed with family while they were away, meaning even more time that he and Josh were apart, and who knows how much more time they potentially still had together. And then there is another aspect of the situation that made life increasingly difficult for the family. The cost of everything related to Josh, his illness. The family had gotten themselves very deep in debt, and they wanted to try everything to cure their son. But they were nearly at the end of their rope. Peter was doing his very best to make as much money from anywhere that he could, but it was nowhere enough to even make the down payments on all the loans they had taken out, and the banks did not care about Josh and his illness. They were ruthless when it came to their money. It was a very real worry that the family would soon lose their house, their car, and everything of value, meaning they would not even be able to take Josh home or drive him to the hospital. It came to a point where a very difficult decision had to be made. And besides that, all the experts that the family had asked for help had come up with the same conclusion. They could not figure out what was going on with Josh. It seemed like there was simply no avoiding the inevitable for the young boy. So what did they have to make the rest of his life about suffering in hospitals away from his best friend Snickers? Would it not be more humane to just have him enjoy the time he got left and then just see when his time would come? That is what the family would end up deciding. The days actually started off quite well for the family. Josh was feeling well, and Snickers was also again over the moon to be with his little friend again. They would spend all day playing, while Peter and Najee would just watch with smiles on their faces and tears in their eyes. They had not told Josh about their plan. He would be too young to understand and maybe spend his days worrying instead of enjoying himself. That is what is most important right now, that he spends his days with a smile on his face every waking moment. As always, it sadly only took a couple of days outside of the hospital before Josh would start to get weaker again. Symptoms started to slowly appear again, and Peter and Nadja knew that this was most likely the beginning of the end. But they kept brave faces. For Josh, Snickers was getting tired as well. Their son was very used to these still minor symptoms by now, and it did nothing to dampen his fun yet. He still wanted to play all day, every day, and Snickers was more than happy to oblige, at least for now, because all this energy expansion also started to catch up with the beloved family dog. After about a week of playing together, Snickers started to slow down significantly, even though Josh still had energy. His symptoms had gotten worse again, but he was fighting through it, so there was room for Peter and Nadja to worry a little bit more about their beloved animal. His energy started to drop so significantly that Peter thought it would probably be best to get him to a vet for a quick check, just to make sure it was only exhaustion and nothing more serious. They hated the idea of keeping Josh and Snickers apart for any amount of time now, but did decide that it was probably for the best. Peter had called ahead to the vet and explained the symptoms of Snickers to him. He was hoping the expert could give him an idea of what was wrong with the dog and how long the animal might have to be away from home. 2 to 3 weeks away, he could not determine what was exactly wrong with Snickers over the phone, but compared to dogs that came in with similar symptoms as Peter was describing, the vet could give him the indication that Snickers might be away from home for 2 to 3 weeks. Those words were heartbreaking for Peter. He knew that if he decided to bring Snickers away to the vet, which was looking like it was very much necessary for the dog's survival, there was a very good chance that Josh would never see his friend again, in the hospital again soon. With how quickly Josh's condition worsened, Peter knew that he might have to go to the hospital again soon to make his son comfortable until the end, because they had agreed that they would not try and threaten his symptoms anymore when he would be brought in again. Bringing Snickers the next day, Peter agreed with the vet that he would bring Snickers in the next day and that he should keep him there as long as it took to get him healthy again. The thought of doing this broke Peter's heart, but he could not lose both his son and his best friend like that. Josh was resting in bed. His symptoms were worsening and he needed a lot of rest. Though saddened that today was his last day with Snickers, he felt relieved that his best friend would get the care he needed. Snickers had also been growing weaker, and Josh knew he didn't have much time left, but he wanted a different fate for his beloved dog. They spent the entire evening together, playing, walking, and eating their favorite foods. It was a perfect farewell. That night they fell asleep together. The next morning, both were noticeably worse. The day had drained them, but Peter believed it had been worth it. He was set to take Snickers to the vet, and Josh, despite his weakness, gave his best friend a final tearful hug. Peter and Nadja could not hold back their own tears. When Peter placed a hand on his son's shoulder to tell him it was time, something unexpected happened. Josh passed out. He was only unconscious for a second, but his condition was clearly deteriorating fast. Peter rushed Snickers to the vet, eager to return home to spend time with his son while he still could. Josh spent the following days in bed, only waking up to eat and drink. Strangely, his condition did not worsen after the goodbye hug. In fact, to his parents' astonishment, he began to improve. With no medication or special treatment, his recovery seemed inexplicable. Nadja believed it was a miracle. The power of love had saved their son. But Peter suspected something else and called their doctor, who soon proposed a logical explanation. Josh was taken to the hospital for tests. By then, he was doing much better, his biggest concern being when he would see Snickers again. But that reunion would have to wait a little longer. The tests revealed that Josh had a severe allergic reaction to the flea spray Peter had recently switched to. The symptoms had been so extreme that no one initially suspected an allergy. When asked, Peter had assured the doctors he hadn't changed anything in Josh's environment, unaware that the new flea spray was the culprit. This was the best news the family could have hoped for. They immediately removed the harmful flea spray from the house and reverted to the previous brand after confirming it was safe for Josh. He was also given medication to manage any future reactions. A week later, Snickers returned from the vet, fully recovered. The reunion between Josh and his best friend was heartwarming. The family was overjoyed, knowing the two would never have to be separated again.